Yes, good evening. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order our September
Recording
8th.
in progress.
I'd like to call to order our September 8th, 2025 school board meeting. The current time is 6:32. At this time, I would like to go around and have introductions, starting with Jason.
Jason Jansen, Steve Cash, Steve Orzak,
Ron Meckler.
Mary Heather Noble.
Ellen Whelan Weist.
Jamie McCallum.
Trisha Allen.
Jess Venable Novak.
Ellie Roth.
Laura Harthian. Wendy Baker.
Barbara Wilson.
Suzanne Buck.
Nalva Glickman.
And administrators in the room.
Nellie Palazzo.
Courtney Cron, Director of Teaching and Learning.
Matt Correnti, Director of Finance and Operations.
Excellent. Thank you all. And we don't need to bring, thank you. Next, I would like a motion to adopt our agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda as warned.
A second?
Second.
Okay. And any discussion, questions, changes? Seeing none? Then all those in favor of adopting the agenda as warned, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Next is our first public comment period. No comments in the room. Is there anyone online, Jason? Could you check that for us?
No.
No, okay. So then, moving right along is a recommendation to approve the minutes of August 25th.
I'm sorry, just real quick, I wonder, should we be moving any of these folks over to panelists just as
Oh, we could.
admin?
You could, yeah. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes for August 25th. If I could have a motion
so moved.
Second.
and a second. Okay, any comments, feedback, corrections? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes from August 25th, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes have been approved. Moving right along on our agenda is approval of the ACSD bills. So I'm gonna hand it off to Jason.
Yeah, Suzanne and I read one general fund warrant dated August 29th, 2025. The amount of $1,007,867.59. That was it. There were a couple questions that were answered immediately.
Okay.
So I move that we approve the bills as read.
Second.
Any questions? Excellent. Well, all those in favor of approving the ACSD bills as warned and read, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes, the bills have been approved. Now it's the report of the superintendent.
Okay, we'll begin as we do with personnel appointments and resignations. They are presented for your consideration, and most of these positions are adjustments that happen with the beginning of school, beginning of programming, things of that nature. You see a resignation of Michelle Black. She was actually somebody who is going to be joining us as a halftime FTE as an evaluator for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds as part of the efforts to ensure that our preschool teachers are not evaluating students, teaching students, providing direct service to students, case managing students, et cetera, et cetera. So Nellie and her team are working as to how to fill that so that we're ensuring that our evaluations are all done, with a degree of separation throughout the district. But otherwise, they are there for your approval.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the appointments and resignations?
So moved.
Okay, And a second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions?
I have a quick question, kind of on the resignation of a special educator, but also, so I had a question about that, and then you had your weekly update today, which also talked about specialized services, so it's all coming together nicely. But I guess I just had a question, knowing that Michelle Black was kind of the early education group, the 3 to 5 year olds. And after reading today's email, just kind of wondering like how many, like what does that 2 to 5 year old group of special educators look like presently, knowing that, because the numbers had, in the email, had folks that were in district buildings, but I also know that they serve all 2 to 5 year olds in our district.
Yep, so we remember, you might remember that last year we had 2 outreach special educators for preschool students. And it was determined that we could have 1 to fill that responsibility. And then we also have each of our 3 preschool teachers are dually licensed. So they are all licensed in special education as well. So those students are well covered relative to case management and service delivery. We also have a speech and language professional who services, many pre-K needs. The adjustment that we're making this year is really around evaluations. That's mostly to ensure that we've got that degree of separation, so that the person who's referring the student potentially is not also evaluating the student, and all of those kinds of things, right? It becomes sort of too much in one thing to meet the objectivity, right, standards that are important. So does that help?
Yeah, I just have another follow-up question. How many, so is there still just that one person that's doing the outreach position?
Yes.
And do we have a sense of how many evaluations happen in a given school year? Because I know there's like the numbers of folks that are on IEPs and 504s, but I would also assume that a lot more people get evaluated that don't qualify.
I think that is something that Dr. Collazo could add to an upcoming presentation that she makes around, as she's kind of finding her way through the district and working with our evaluation teams and around those types of questions. So
yeah, I just asked because I know so many
Yeah.
hours go into an evaluation and would want those hours captured relative to the staffing we have, as opposed to only people who are on the different plans. Yeah, thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Steve?
I had noticed that most of these appointments are coaches and of that nature. When it says, just for clarification, when it says step 6, that's on it's not a teacher step 6 or a contract step 6, it's on that supplemental.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, it is. There's a specific grid that is specific to coaches and
Right.
program coordinators, department coordinators, things of that nature. So it refers to that.
Yeah, so the choreographer is not a step 6 full-time teacher.
Correct.
They are in fact
Yes.
a coach.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Okay. And Jason?
I noticed a few resignations of paraprofessionals, and there's still several postings on the website, so how are we doing in general for paraprofessional coverage?
So we have 3 openings right now that are unfilled, and I mean that feels good in that sense. Compared to years past, that feels good. Remember that we also removed, 8.5 paraeducator positions, I think, if memory serves. So we're looking for fewer people in that section, but we have 3 that are vacant. You can see some are filled, and we have some that have come through the process already, and they'll be on the next board agenda. Yeah.
Others? Okay, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of approving the personnel appointments and resignations as warned on our agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Steve and Laura.
So the second item is just some opening school highlights. This is the first time we're meeting after kids and adults are all in the building, and so that's always a transition that we go into ready and hypervigilant and are, generally, just kind of, we all work together as a team. Enrollment as of today is 1,751 pre-K through 12 students. That's down about 2% from last year at this time, which is not a material drop, and may change. We take enrollment officially for the state October 15th, so we'll see what that looks like. We do have far fewer homeschool students registered with the Agency of Ed than we normally have at this time. Normally we have over 100, and now we only had 52 at last check. So that's interesting. And we have some of our schools that have gone up in enrollment, and others that have gone down a little bit, which is really more just kind of the ebb and flow of the classes, in the different towns in that way. We, according to, so far most everyone, including our bus company, this has been one of the smoothest starts in memory. So in terms of people, being able to come into learning quickly. And that's, I've been in 5 schools, spent meaningful time in 5 schools since the beginning of school. And if we add the other members of the team, that will be, each of them. And the classrooms feel good. They feel good. The staffing feels good. And it doesn't, last year at this time we had, teachers with broken feet and bones and, and we had maternity leaves, and multiple maternity, right? We had a number of things going on that needed to be covered. And this year it feels a little bit different in that sense. The transition into Salisbury of students from Ripton, I think, is generally reported as smooth. Tracy Harrington has been a champion in, working with Matt and Billy Waller to make sure that the bus transportation for students in Ripton is worked out. We've had a couple of iterations of that, added some stops on the way home. There are actually 6 different dismissal options if you are in Salisbury, and that relates to what you could do. We got early bus, late bus, so there's a number of things that they're working out, but that you wouldn't know it by being there. It's everything feels very calm and clear. And in fact, it's one of the things that I would just like to offer for board consideration, and maybe this is something Barb could follow up on. I think it's probably a good time in the month of September just to arrange maybe a couple tour times. Where I think we might have done this in the past, where it's just like, okay, well, we're going to start as a group and we're going to start here and then we're going to map our way, just so that people who haven't been in our schools or haven't been in our schools while learning is happening, right, can see that as they know you're coming and, I'll be with you. And so it's not as much of an unexpected thing as it might otherwise be in that way, so everybody can prepare. So, if that's of interest, then you can let Barb know that, and we'll maybe arrange a couple of opportunities for just those learning walks. That where you can see generally what's going on. You can see math instructional specialists at work. There's a lot of learning that's happening in our buildings, and it feels very good to generally be there.
And thank you for that. Just looking around the room, I saw a lot of nods. So this is, sounds really promising that this is something folks want to do. So
there's nothing better than asking a student, what are you learning today, and having them eagerly tell you.
Yes.
That's just really wonderful. And if we have a little time, then we can have everybody have special badges, right? And so that we're going in a way that just really feels like students can prepare for us and share with us things that are important, and that's really nice. So So those are just a couple of highlights, you know, from opening school as a whole. I don't know if there are any questions about that. Steve.
On the enrollment, and I know you may not know this yet, enrollments aren't due to the state yet. Are we meeting that D6 class size across the board?
We have one class in let's see. I think we have one that is below 10. You know, and I would have to go back in to make sure I am clear about which one, but otherwise we are meeting the class size policy. Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Oh, I just had a question about the enrollment in terms of the senior class for kids who are doing dual enrollment. Just do you know if that contributes to the amount of kids who are like, you know, attending, you know, grades K through 12, or because those kids are like not here but they're graduating with us?
Can you please?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe that everybody is represented, but I'll follow up on that, Nava, and just make sure, you know, in that sense. Yeah. Yep. It can sometimes impact what feels like graduation rate, you know, but in terms of enrollment, because they're dually enrolled, you know, I think that's fine, but I'll double check. Yeah, it's a good question. Others? So that was number 2 and number 3. Number 4 is also related, which is the roof repair status, and I think we're completely done.
Next 100 years or so.
Yeah. Yes, that project is finished, and we are awaiting final information from our insurance company as to you know what those final bills are and the check that comes. It's the last time it will appear on a superintendent's report, and so just wanted to make sure that there aren't any outstanding questions about that, since that was clearly something that everybody worked really hard to come together around. Similar to the beginning of school, which, by the way, if it is the smoothest opening of school in memory, it's because that doesn't happen just by accident. That happens because people are planning for kids. We have, you know, all of our principals are returning leaders in the district. Like there are ingredients that go into that make that happen. You know, teachers spend time, you know, with their curriculum. The curriculum team spends time doing that. People had training and opportunities. We also had, you know, our staggered start, I think, is really helpful to kids and adults, you know, where we have 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. And last year the calendar fell in a weird way that it didn't happen like that. And so you know, those things are all of note. Yep. Okay, so municipal updates. We have a couple of municipal projects, you know, that are going along, and Matt, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about the one that's going on here, we can add that, and then also MUMS, you know,
Stormwater project?
yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, for any building that had a roof size over 2 acres, I think, the town was required to redo the stormwater permitting, and that led to some re-engineering of how water was handled when it ran off the roofs of Mary Hogan and the high school this year. I think they also did MUMS, but this is a town-led project that was really fun to work around for the first week of school. But nevertheless, we have, I think, reached substantial completion at Mary Hogan and MUMS, and we're still waiting on a little bit of pavement repair, as you'll see in the parking lot here, but the heavy-duty work is done, and should be smooth sailing after this, even when it rains.
Who pays for that?
The town.
Awesome.
And
That's what I thought.
yeah, there's a, I think the district is obligated to pay a small percentage of it over a period of time, and I'll get you some details on that, but it's immaterial.
Okay.
Grant.
Excellent.
One of the other things that we spoke about last year in terms of our work with the town involves MUMS, and some flashing lights that relate to the crosswalk. And so we, Matt and I had a meeting, with representatives from the town, and they just couldn't be better to work with. And so those should be installed shortly, and that's the last part of that project. But we will be having flashing lights there so that our students are able to push a button when they get to a crosswalk and can move ahead, which, in the evening. That'll be right in the crosswalk that's right at the end of the mom's driveway, not the one that's down necessarily by Hannaford, but right at the end of mom's driveway. So students will be instructed to cross there, if they're going to be crossing. So we'll look for that.
The middle road.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Next up, we have an update just on, you might remember that there are district quality standards. And I know that the Vermont School Boards Association has just sent out a little bit of information about this. The Agency of Ed, I went to a meeting about their process, is choosing to do some beta testing of some of the rubrics, where districts are going to be rating ourselves, and then our data will not be reported individually per district. They'll be looking at how the data is aggregating across the state to determine where is technical assistance needed. So the meeting I attended in the spring, late spring, was related to the finalization of some of those rubrics, particularly around, local assessment and, curricular coordination, things like that. I think, we should fare very well on most of those rubrics. They're written such that, they provide a stretch goal for districts in that way. But when they come out, then, it will be our office's job to go ahead and fill them out, and we'll find a way to keep you apprised as to the things that the themes of strength and, and areas of growth that as a district, we have. But that's more just an opportunity to put that in front of you as that's coming. That's how they're handling that this year. It is something that they are also looking at to determine what kinds of technical assistance might new districts need, as those are formed, and getting to know how districts are functioning across the state. So really
Do we have any idea when?
So September 12th is the hope for time. We'll see if that works. I have seen drafts of all the rubrics, and our team has seen drafts, stage drafts that relate to those. And I think as I say, generally speaking, we should be in a pretty strong position. We'll see how they are finalized, and then we'll participate, accordingly.
Right. It's a good thing we didn't wait in selecting our goals. Remember, we were like way back a year or so ago.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do some of the good things that we've done. So,
Yep.
Excellent. Anything else, ma'am?
Nope, not unless there are any questions.
Great. Thank you so very much for that. Next is report of our student representatives, and Nava is here. Do you have something that you could share with us?
I have some stuff from the past couple weeks, because obviously last Monday, or no, that was like right before school started, so yeah, it's been a bit. First, Taryn is at a horse conference, 4-H.
Eastern
doing
States,
something. Yes. Doing something probably very cool and important. I don't know much about it, but that's where she is. And she said that she was sorry that she couldn't be here, and so I'm passing the message along.
Thank you.
But yeah, so what's been going on since I last shared information is our cell phone policy at MEHS is like fully in effect. So how it works is we have these things called yonder pouches, and they're these cloth pouches. They have a magnet on the top, and as you walk into the school, you basically put the pouch on top of the magnet, and it opens it. You put your phone in, and then you close it again, and then it's stuck through. all day, and then at the end of the day, as you're leaving, there's multiple stations to try to reduce the amount of like backup. And so you unmagnetize it and you open the case and then you leave. And then another option is to leave your phone in your car. A lot of people do that. I personally choose to do that to avoid lines. It just seems easier. But yeah, I think what I've noticed is obviously decreased, like people are not on their phones. I think people are looking around like more, that type of thing. During lunch periods is I think when I notice it the most. We have like board games or card games in the cafeteria, so we'll start playing those, which, you know, is kind of funny because sometimes it can seem a little bit like, oh, we're like seniors and we're playing like Guess Who or whatever at the lunch table, but in reality it's actually like really fun, and I think people are talking to each other more. I think the general consensus from what I've heard is that people don't notice it very much. But I was talking to some of my teachers and hearing what some of them were saying while I was at work, and I think it's a different experience depending on what types of teaching you're doing, and I think it's going to be an adjustment depending on what you're doing. So I think some like paraprofessionals and people who are dealing with students who might like feel more attached to their phones, or, you know, be more reliant on them in the past, or just people who are struggling more with that, is a lot more of an adjustment than like the other teacher that I talked to. He said like that his classes are like IB diploma students and he's teaching like IB diploma math, and then it's like his advisory students, and so that is working really smoothly. And then this other teacher said like there's been some struggles, people trying to like sneak phones and stuff, but obviously like the school has built a system for these types of things, like they expected it, and I think it's gonna take time, but I mean overall I don't mind it, and I don't think a lot of people really mind it either. And I think that was what was expected, like when it happened in other schools, and that's what all the students from other schools have said too. And it's really fun. We've talked about like, oh, it's like hard to take pictures and stuff. Some people have brought like little cameras and stuff even. So yeah, it's great. And then going on top of that, I think people are just really starting to like adjust and get into a rhythm. I noticed a lot of people like last week were like, wow, this is the longest 4-day week of my life. But then people were talking about like this idea that like once you get into a 5-day week, like you start to build up like this stamina and you get into your routine, and like it doesn't feel so hard. And I think that's very true. Like there's a stamina to school, and we're getting back into the routine, we're getting there. So yeah, that's what I have.
Any questions? Steve?
Have you noticed that the adults in the building are honoring the cell phone policy as well, or?
Very much so, yeah. A lot of my teachers are like really ecstatic because they will always like hate their phones anyway. Like so many of my teachers. Like Mr. Harrington is like over the moon. He has a BlackBerry, I believe, so he's thrilled. And like a lot of other teachers, I think, they definitely respect it, and I think it's a mutual thing where it's like, okay, you don't have yours, I won't have mine.
Any others? Well, thank you for that. Appreciate it, and we look forward to continued reports at next or subsequent board meetings. Okay, so we're making good progress here. Next up is report of the chair. And so, and you'll see I have 45 minutes. It may not take 45 minutes. We thought it would be a good opportunity to have some time on the agenda to really talk about board operations, allow people to ask questions as things have maybe come up, that kind of thing. And just, we have so much going on.
it's just really good for us to always remind ourselves of what is governance versus operations and all that kind of thing. And even simple things of what's required for meeting minutes, right? So during the next presentation or this next topic, feel free, if you have questions, to just ask those, and everyone will benefit from that, because there's, I've gotten questions that it would be, really nice for everyone to have the benefit of that as well. So what I did do is I stole a couple charts from our onboarding training, and they're just kind of like reminder charts, and Jason's gonna share those, so we'll give him a second here to bring those up. And this is really information from the Vermont School Board Association handbook. And in this particular case, it's just really a reminder, what is our work, right? And in this particular case, if you could go back one slide.
That is slide number 1.
Yeah, tonight, slide number 1. Oops, there we go. And it just as a reminder, is really establishing a vision and engaging the community. And where have we heard that, right? We've been doing a lot of work on that this year as a priority. Establish policy, obviously, a ton of work has been going on in the policy arena. Board and superintendent partnership, effective and ethical operations, monitoring progress and performance of the district, and our budget and financial oversight. And so just really from a really high level, this is where our work falls. And I wasn't going to belabor this. It's just here as a reminder. And if there's any questions that folks have, if they can't be answered here today, then be happy to take those back and get answers for you.
Will we get a copy of this PowerPoint?
I can send it to you. Yeah, definitely. I apologize. I probably should have had it in the pack, but I hadn't really thought about what I was going to do. And I was in France, so it was a little hard. And so all of this maps to sections on the Vermont School Board Association website. None of this is different than that. And there's, and in the binder that you get from the Vermont School Board Association, there's several pages written on each one of those. And there's even training, that they offer as well. Okay? And then the next slide is just our roles and responsibilities. We have legally mandated responsibilities, which we've already spoke a little bit about, is the district quality standards, and that's what the Rubrics about. And we've been really working hard over the last couple of years, identifying and assessing where we need improvement based on those standards, and selecting their goals, their the various different standards that they have, and working on implementing them. And that was what really prompted us to have the topic that we did at the retreat that just happened. And just a reminder that we are a quasi-judicial body, in the sense that if in fact a situation arises in the district where we have to basically be the jury, right? Hear it and make a ruling based on something that's happening. So because of that, it's really important, for us to always keep that in mind when we're dealing with folks, that may have complaints, that kind of thing. And beef, whatever, to make sure that we are directing them, to really talk to the teacher, talk to the principal, talk to the superintendent, because we don't want to have information that could cause us to basically not participate in that, because it could bias us from that. Of course, we do collective bargaining. We were ruled from open meeting law. And of course, there's changes that have happened over the last year. There is a really good training course. I was looking at this earlier today that the Secretary of State has, in fact, put together on the open meeting law. And so I can, send that link out to folks if they want, or we could dedicate some board time at some point if folks would like, down the road to cover maybe do it in chunks, right? Because we don't want to take up a whole board meeting to do that. If there's certain aspects of the open meeting law that would be good to, dive down a little deeper to make sure that we're all understanding it. Next is public comment and minutes. Wanted to spend a little bit of time on meeting minutes, because there has been questions about meeting minutes, and what, as a district we've been doing as kind of a best practice is following the outline of the agenda, using that as an agenda and just plugging in information. But one of the things, if you go to the Secretary of State training, right, it basically says what needs to be included, and it's really give a true indication of the business of the meeting that took place, cover all topics and motions that arise. Minimum content is members present, active participants, motions, proposals, resolutions, and their dispositions, and voting results, noting individual votes if a roll call has happened, right? And so a lot of that is board, but if a committee has made a decision, okay, we're gonna bring this forward, to the full board, that would be something you'd wanna capture in the minutes, right? Kind of major decisions. We tend to, in some cases, we have varying levels of degree of detail in our minutes. And I think it's really, what the board should really then decide, well, what is our norm? What do we really want to include and what level of detail? It doesn't have to be a word by word play of what happened in that, and especially since we record our meetings now. Folks can actually, if they're really interested in a topic, they can, that they may look at the minutes and say, oh, geez, I wonder what happened there. They can then go listen to the minutes or the meeting recording as well. So I'd love to entertain some discussion, on this, because I know this would be good for all of us to kind of follow the same thing here. And I know Mary Heather had sent out a little email on that as well in my absence. So Mary Heather?
Well, just wanted to point out the open meeting law, section, it's section 312B1 that kind of specifies the sort of minimum requirements that minutes should have. And I appreciate this discussion because I know I put more information than is probably necessary or even really best practice, frankly. And so it would be helpful, I think, for the board to come to some kind of what's the standard we want to hold ourselves to. I certainly wouldn't expect other people to go to the level of detail, but that's just my nature and how I do it, but it's probably, it could be really dialed back and probably should be as well. And so I think it's a good, just a good conversation to have, what is the expectation we want to have as a board, and, what kind of, do we want our committees to have as well, so that there is some degree of at least somewhat, consistency. It doesn't have to be identical. Obviously, we have a lot of different people taking minutes, but so I would love to hear even other people's experience with minutes on done by other public bodies if y'all have experience with that.
Okay, Jamie, and then Steve, did you have your hand up for?
I was done.
Okay.
I think this discussion is maybe sparked by me because I took some very bad minutes recently.
Well, not necessarily.
And so I just want to do a thing there about this. So to Mary Heather's point, I really appreciate the minutes you take. Ellen takes the minutes for the policy committee, which are excellent. And then before each meeting, I read over them and be like, what did we do actually, right? And it's like 2 weeks go by, you get it figured out. So I don't know about best practice, whatever, but the detail that you guys put in there is great. Same thing for Jess's minutes on the community engagement committee. I find them really helpful. So I appreciate this pointing to this thing, and I don't know about the standard we should all go to, but you guys do set a high standard, but in the past, definitely I've read minutes here and there from and I'm like, I don't really know what happened at this meeting, right? And here, when I read the minutes from this meeting, I always do, and I feel like that should be the standard. Can we tell what happened? Or not really, right? And I feel like there's some subjectivity there and some latitude, but I feel like that's a reasonable expectation that we should hold ourselves to.
Ellen.
Steve
I'm sorry, Steve. Sorry.
I'll go after Steve.
So I have come to expect the level of detail, so that's nice. But what I would offer is a suggestion that I've seen in other places, especially ones that record, is that you keep the more general level notes, but that you also have a timestamp on there that says where you are in the meeting in the notes. And that makes it really easy to go, if you want to drill down, you can go to the recording and look to the 5-minute mark or whatever, where those comments were made, and you get to actually see it. But just a suggestion, not a, it might be a little less of a burden on you to have to record what everybody says, and it would also give you a reference point in the recording where you could look if you want to see what actually happened.
And with the recordings for the board meetings, what's happening now is by agenda topic, right? If you go to the MCTV website, you can get that level of information. So obviously when we have committee meetings, that's a little harder to do, I think. But definitely for the board meetings. And I'm not looking to create more work for people. I want it to be comfortable and people feel that, they can actually do this task and that it's not overbearing as well.
I actually was thinking something along the lines of what you're saying, Steve. I do think that, especially for longer meetings, but even the 2-hour committee meetings, it can be pretty daunting to think, oh wow, and a lot of our committee meetings that I'm in, actually, there's an agenda, but the discussion touches on everything. So it's pretty hard to know where to go, even if you're estimating it. So I was sort of debating that in my head as someone who takes minutes, do I also want to be clocking everything? And that would be hard to do. I think we could move in that direction. I would ask that chairs take some responsibility on that, maybe even just saying okay, and if we're moving to a new topic, just gonna say out loud, it's 8:35 a.m. And then that's something that, as someone who's listening and taking notes, I'll just write that down. I think this is gonna depend to some degree on how your brain works, which is everyone's different. It would actually be more difficult for me to try to editorialize what is the most essential 1 or 2 things within a conversation and decide that's what I'm going to write down. It's easier for me to just write what I'm hearing. But I also just want to throw out there that there are some pretty incredible AI note-taking tools that I have colleagues who have used. I went in really skeptical. And it's pretty astonishing how well they record what's happening, but synthesize it pretty accurately. So if we move, I do think that the level of detail that some of us are able to provide, I would call out Ron as another person who takes excellent detailed minutes, is really advantageous to a member of the public or any of us. And I recognize that can be a hard standard to meet. Because not everyone can do that. I don't know how Mary Heather does it by hand. That's just how, it's easier for me to write what I'm hearing. And so just to throw out there, I would advocate that we maintain a higher standard of the detail, even if it's, what Jamie says, can someone really understand what happened in that meeting? And if we get to a point where everyone on a committee is like, I can't do that,
Right.
and who the minute taker is becomes really difficult, we might think about using technology tools that allow us to do some of that with human brains, making sure that what the AI is capturing is accurate to the conversation as well. But just to go back, I do like the idea of trying to timestamp a little bit for the videos.
Okay. Others? Suzanne?
So, Jamie, I wouldn't say this conversation is based on your thoughts. Because this is a conversation that this board has had on and off for years.
Right.
I mean, depending on who the note taker was and the length of the meeting, sometimes it was just recorded of, who was present, the motions that were made, said conversation ensued. You had no clue what the conversation was about, but you knew how the motion came out. I like the level of detail because not everyone has access to a computer and to the internet. So by being able to read a hard copy, because they can ask for minutes to be mailed to them, they can keep track of how things are going. I will say that there are certain committees that the committee meetings look almost boilerplate because of the nature of their business being conducted in executive session. So those meetings are gonna look like, yep, we opened the meeting, we had public comment, no, there was no public comment, we approved the minutes, then we went into executive session.
Right.
So, but the detail is nice, and it definitely helps the public understand where we're going, what was said, and I've heard people say that they appreciate it.
Okay, was there someone before?
I wasn't before though.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, okay. I was just gonna say, I think, with respect to AI, I know it really was helpful to use AI when we were having a discussion as a board about, when we were talking about Act 73, when it was in its infancy, and we were, preparing to, put forward some comments as a board. It was very helpful to kind of use AI to, transcribe that conversation and then put it into some bullet points. I think if we were to go that route, we would want to make sure that we have what's presented maintained as high-level bullet points and not, a play-by-play of who said what, because I think that gets into some real murky territory. And we also, it's redundant because we've got the recording, and to me, the public service is providing a tool for folks to understand what's going on without having to take all the time to, watch a whole thing or read the play-by-play transcript. So I could be supportive of AI if it were used appropriately, and also, met open meeting standards in terms of, had all the basic minimums and really showed that the warrant topics were indeed discussed.
Jess.
I was just gonna say that when I started being a note taker for the C&E committee, I felt like it was hard to keep up, and a choice that I made was to pay less attention to like who said what and more of the substantive content. So that was just a tweak that worked for me to, I think, maintain the high level of detail and like also not have to write everything down. So I feel like I found a happy medium for myself and how I work. But I agree that the level of detail that we all are at right now feels hopeful.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Steve?
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to kind of balance this. I can certainly appreciate having a very detailed record for the public to read after the fact. I'm also balancing that with volunteer board members who are part of the public service. I think is making sure there is a record of these meetings, but it's also being present and being decision makers, making the best decisions we can, and kind of building on what Jess said, for the folks that have to split that task, like, what is the cost to this board of doing that? I think if we had infinite resources and the ability for someone to act as a scribe and capture everything, that's great, but I do want to balance that public record with what does that cost some of the decision makers? And I think just trying to balance both of those, and if I wrote it down, I think you said give a true indication of the business of the meeting. That to me is a very, very low bar.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
that is not a high bar.
No.
If that's what exists
No.
as what we are responsible for providing, that is a low bar.
Yeah.
That does not mean that's where we need to end up.
Right.
But that is what we do need to account for. So I'm just trying to balance both of those, and if I end up as a note taker, the notes will not be that detailed. Jamie, I don't know what your experience is like, but I'll just volunteer that myself. So be warned, committees and others, that's if I'm your note taker.
Jason.
So my 2 cents is that if I'm taking notes during a meeting, if they're gonna be real terse.
Yeah.
And if we need this level of detail, I'm going back and listening to the meeting and redoing the notes after the fact.
Right.
So that's my reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I want to be engaged and present
Yeah.
and like in it.
Yeah.
Not,
Yeah.
that way.
And when I was note taker in facilities a couple of years ago, that's a choice I made. I didn't even attempt because I wanted to be present, right? But then I spent a whole lot of time going back and listening to it, and then like, oh, I better listen to that again. Did I quite word it right? Which you can drive yourself crazy by doing that. And I'm so envious of folks that can sit there on the fly and be in a meeting and be present and be able to type notes. I'm just so envious. My brain, it just doesn't work that way. Okay, this has been really good discussion, and it's, the whole purpose is, we so often are just doing business in the meetings, and once in a while being able to have a topic and dialogue around it, right? I think is really important as a board. And so it sounds like pretty much folks are happy with what we're doing with level of detail. And I think then we continue, right? We continue the best practice from our perspective as to the bare bones minimum. Okay, thank you so much. The other things on here, we already know about executive sessions and public records and record requests. You'll see there's underlines there, so I will send this out because it does link you to the information, so you can use it as a guide if you wanted to drill down on it. And then the last page that's here, Jason, if you could do that for us, is just this, and I think folks have probably seen this before. It just tries, and this is, again, what we share during our onboarding training. So this really tries to show what the role of governance is from a school board perspective, and that of the superintendent from an operational perspective. And then we come together in the middle with collaborative relationships and communication and accountability, which I think we do well as a board in that aspect. But the main reason here is to really help remind ourselves every once in a while, oh yeah, we're on that left side for the most part. We're not doing the implementation, but we are setting the policy. We're setting, really helping to drive that implementation and with guidance. Okay, Mary Heather.
I have a couple things. One, I do have a point that goes back to open meeting law that we can talk about in a little bit.
Sure.
But one of the things that came up when we were talking about it was, for example, some of the efforts, particularly around, we all had the training with community engagement, and I think a lot of us are, really wanting to improve as a board with that, and wanting to make sure that our committees have community engagement in mind. And also, we have to figure out how to make sure that those efforts don't bleed into, for example, some of the operational efforts with community engagement, or if there is some kind of, choreographed partnership between the two. Because, for example, I'll just use this as an example that we talked about was, so there's definite operational efforts to get sort of community feedback, for example, on like the Shoreham Bridport question and grade configuration in the future there. And that's definitely like an operationally driven effort. And also we want to have, some presence in the schools and, invite, create opportunities for community members to come in and share their thoughts. And some of those thoughts may in fact fall into that conversation. So I think there needs to be a way to make sure that any comments that are given are appropriately directed so that people, I guess the worry is that people may come to like a board sort of hosted gathering and then convey opinions about, something that the district is collecting surveys about, and then they think, well, I've shared my opinion and it may not have landed in the right spot. So I think, that kind of coordination is something that we need to be thinking of, particularly in this section in the middle.
Yeah.
So, and I'll talk about the other open meeting law thing after we're done with this slide, if it's okay.
Okay, Jamie.
Yeah, I think this is the tension that happened in our meeting this morning with the Community Engagement Committee. Do you remember? Like, it was kind of like, who's at the meeting? What are they saying? What aren't they saying? And to me, I guess as soon as this flashed up, my eyes went to where the community engagement square is, and I guess I would have imagined it being in the middle. So I'm just,
That's interesting. Yeah.
so I would just like to get a sense of why it's not.
That's actually a good question. Yeah, so I know this has evolved over time and I tend to agree with you. Obviously we can be responsible for identify the need, right? And we're going to talk more about the retreat in a few moments, right? Around community engagement, and have a policy related to community engagement, and the types of engagement that we would want to have in certain situations. But the actual engagement could very much be that collaboration or even be spearheaded on the on the right hand side to some extent, I think.
You might, the way I think of it is probably similar, Jamie. The community engagement depends on who's in the community. That operations does all the time are around, parents, right? Caregivers, and strategic partners, things like that. We have, in my tenure, we've expanded that community engagement, in part, I think, to make some progress in maybe some relationship repair, right, and some coming together after some things that have happened during a more divisive time. And I think it's the board is elected by their communities, right? And I think you are accountable to those communities, and I'm accountable to you. So I think that's probably why it maybe leans on that side, because you represent the larger community voice about what is valued, at least in the way that Vermont schools and the community relationship has been to date. So, that's important.
Right. And I think, thank you for that. And so then in thinking about it, it's really important as we are engaging is to understand how to respond to concerns that we might get, right? You might have, you might be in the grocery store or whatever and have, someone very concerned about what's happening in their child's classroom, right? And so what
would be appropriate then is to really ask, well, have you talked to the teacher, right? Is that first point of contact. And if they have, the principal, and if they've done that as well, then the superintendent, as opposed to us, forming opinions and dragging on the conversation. Because who knows, that could be a situation that later comes to us, right? In some other situation as a judicial, and then you'd have to basically say, I can't participate because I know too much. But we don't know what's going on there, and so for us to give guidance would be rather difficult and could cause harm, as opposed to solving the problem. So, any other thoughts on this, questions on this? And the main reason for bringing this is because of the work that we're engaging in. We're doing a lot, right? It's just really a reminder, to make sure that we do stay grounded on that governance side. We're so fortunate, we have an administrative team that does an awesome job, so it makes it, that collaboration, it makes it so much easier for sure.
I have found our communities to be wonderful to engage with. I mean, it's if there's a meeting, people come, and they come with curiosity and a sense of what might happen next and interest about what's going on, and they don't shy away from expressing hard things and wanting to know what might be done or what could be done or what is out there. So I don't know if that's always been folks' experience who have served for quite some time, but I would say just in the time that I've been in the district, it's been a very rewarding part of my job.
Okay. Any questions, anything else anyone would like to share on this? If not, we could move to the next little topic. And who had their hand up?
Mariana, want to talk about the public meeting?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
just one more thing with open meeting law. So this has come up in the past as a question, and I think it was also recently a question with when committees cooperate or come together.
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the things that we wanted to just point out that we had discussed in an executive committee was making sure that we're also following the warning requirements in open meeting law. So if you've got a quorum of your committee participating in another committee's work, you need to keep in mind that if you're going to end up talking about what your committee works on and do the work of your committee during that meeting, it also needs to be warned as your meeting as well. So, for example, like if facilities was getting together with the finance committee to coordinate, bond development, that would be, if there's quorums of both committees, both of those individual committee meetings need to be warned. Minutes would need to be prepared for both of those meetings. And that can be worked out. I'm sure you could probably use the same minutes for both, but nonetheless, you need to make sure that the public, anybody who's keeping an eye on, for example, the facilities meeting, would need to know that business may also be conducted at this joint meeting. So that's just something to keep in mind as we come together. Obviously, I think it will be something that we come up against when we're moving further along in the facilities process. And also as, all of our committees are trying to do more and get advice from the Communications and Engagement Committee on how to do good engagement. So just make sure you're keeping that in mind as well.
Steve? And
Actually, I think Suzanne had her hand up
Suzanne.
first.
The only other thing I'm going to say about open meeting law is that you have to be very careful about discussing committee business, whether it be online or in person. If there's 3 in a committee and 2 of you get together to discuss it outside of a warned meeting, you are actually in violation of open meeting law because you're discussing committee business. And you can't be making decisions and things like that outside of a warned meeting. So have to be
If you're a
careful about
quorum,
that.
if you're a quorum.
I mean, if you want to discuss it by yourself, you're not a quorum, but if there's 3 of you and 2 of you get together, you're now a quorum.
Suzanne, sorry, just to clarify, you said 2 things, discussing and making decisions.
Discussing and or either way.
Yeah. And Steve?
I was gonna talk about it from the other end. If 2 committees get together and that creates a quorum of the board,
Right.
you
Then
also
it's-
have created
now
a
it's a-
higher bar
Yes.
of what you have to
Yes.
warn and how you have to record and all that kind of
Yeah.
thing. So we have some committees that if those 2 committees got together and everybody showed up, that would be a quorum of the board.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Yeah.
So,
I just have a clarifying question. I think I know the answer for the board because it's all board business, but if it's 2 committees, but you're not discussing one of the committee's businesses, do you know what I'm saying? Like I was at the policy committee, so technically the C&E committee was there in a quorum, but we didn't talk about C&E things. I was just at the meeting. And the other committee members happened to be on the other committee.
I know, and that's,
I think we were in a
Well, that's
gray
true.
area where
Yeah.
best
Yeah, but
practice
there's-
is that we would have
Unfortunately,
Okay.
yeah.
at the same time.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's not like we can't ever be in the same room with each other.
Right.
It's just
Right.
what
Yeah,
you
my
do when you're
understanding
in
was
the
it
room
was-
together.
Right. Business.
Exactly,
Right. Yeah.
exactly.
And it's, it's probably the easiest thing to do is if you want to collaborate, just warn, 2 meetings, right? Warn that we're having a joint meeting and then you don't have to worry about it. And regarding the board thing, that was a, good thing to bring up, Steve. If in fact there is a topic that we're working on that brings together that many people, maybe we need to, warn a special board meeting, where we're covering it as opposed, to a committee meeting because it's that widespread, right?
And let's just be clear, there couldn't be a better time for lots of board members to be getting together in any way to talk about ways
Right.
to engage the community.
Oh, yeah.
So this is not in any way to
Exactly.
dispel any
No,
efforts.
no,
It's really like, let's get the technicalities correct so that
Exactly.
furthers that work
Yeah,
forward,
exactly.
But
Exactly.
it's kind of a gray
Thank
area.
you.
Like if I wake up and I'm like, gosh, I'd really love to go to the policy committee meeting today, then am I not supposed to go?
You can
'Cause
go,
but
yeah.
it wasn't warned.
You just can't talk.
Yeah.
No,
you're
because
one
majority, once I go to a policy committee meeting, majority of C&E is there.
Oh, right.
Oh, that's
Because
right.
Jamie and I,
That's
yeah.
right.
We're-
But
And
you
then there's
are-
a few
two
other
of us on
committees,
both
like
of them.
student outcomes, I think might do that with C&E as well.
Yeah.
So I think one of the clarifications around that would be good to investigate is, whether you are invited to be a panelist or not. Or, that's what we call it when you're online, and it's kind of a term that's
Right.
moved into the face-to-face realm as well.
Yeah.
But you can attend anything. It's whether or not you are participating freely in the discussion, in that way, as opposed to just simply commenting, on something. And I think that's just making sure that the agendas aren't adjacent enough together, that we're creating a stream and flow of inertia forward, in areas that might relate to more than one committee's work, which is the beautiful unintended consequence of the public commitment that everyone displays. I'm serious about that, so, that's good.
Steve Cash.
Yeah, 2 things. One, I think we do have an opportunity as a board to make sure that committee conversations that need to get elevated to the full board do. I just think of the facilities committee and the flagpole conversation we had, and it's not totally clear to me what is the mechanism to make that happen and what is the bar for making that happen. So I do think there's a bit of an opportunity there. And then the second comment I have is just, I guess it's the slide that was up, with the Venn diagram there. I don't think that is kind of the notion that people have when they think about education in the state of Vermont. And I think probably as some of the conversations about new districts and stuff like that really get a lot of steam, that's kind of going to get squished together. And a lot of us may end up in conversations where we're coming at it from the left side and we're getting questions that are clearly for the right side. And we're gonna need a way to get those to where they should go. So, because I think we are aware of this, but I don't know how much the broader public is aware of.
Probably not, hardly at all. Yeah, and that's why having a discussion in a meeting like this is a good thing, right? Because we're not only educating ourselves, we're also providing information for the public as well. Yeah. And the first point you made, I was gonna make a comment, and could you remind me, it's kind of, I'm having an elder moment.
Yeah, so it's just that, like, there's a conversation in the committee that takes place.
Yeah.
And
How to elevate it.
how, you know, and
Yeah.
what is that mechanism?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and also what is the bar to do
Yeah.
that?
And so I think one thing to remember is, you know, like if you look at open meeting law, you look at the state statute, committees are advisory, right? And so everything that the committee does is on behalf of the board. And so it's really the board that makes the decisions, right? So, you know, what the committee, in my view, is you're vetting things, you're vetting it, and then at some point you're like, hey, we're ready to, let's bring this to the full board and get more input on it, or give them information so that ultimately a decision could be made, right? But everything, you know, none of us as an individual or as a committee speak for the whole board, and it's really that whole board that needs to then, the majority of it, of the board, make a decision.
Yeah, and the decision making, that part I get. It's more like, you know, what is the particular interest in the topic, and how does the board become aware
Yeah.
of that conversation? Because certainly, the decision.
Our report of the committees.
Yeah.
The report of the committees. Yeah, thank you for that, though. Okay, Steve.
The one, I agree with everything you said. The only thing that I can think of is the negotiations committee. That is empowered.
That's true,
To do
that's
that
true.
on-
Yeah,
so
you're absolutely
They're
correct.
empowered, and you can't take everything before the board in an
Yeah,
open meeting.
absolutely.
So-
You're
so,
absolutely right, Steve. Thank you. Okay. So the other topic that I wanted to talk about is really board retreat next steps, right? It was the 14th that we had our board retreat, which was over 3 weeks ago already. And first of all, I would really like to encourage folks, if you haven't had an opportunity to listen to the recording, or at a minimum, read Mary Heather's notes, which I read today to remind myself because it had been a while. It's a really good thing. And as committees, thinking about what really, kind of how does this apply to individual committees? You know, in the committee, you know, we talked about, it's not our C&E committee that's responsible for doing all the community engagement, it's all of us. And if you look at the model that was presented, really our C&E is doing that level 1, which is like that 90% of communications, thank goodness, you know, it's that much. And really, when do we engage at those higher levels, and what particular topics or decisions that we're in process of making require those levels. So I know that at the meeting, I think we had talked that the policy committee, which is so busy, would take on the first crack, and I know Laura had, you know, kind of volunteered. So that's kind of a next step, right? But another, I'm trying to be kind, not point fingers. I'm trying to be, and no, you know, no, nothing. You know, we're all. It's just been a busy time.
I have sent a draft to Wendy.
She has. Oh, she has. Yay! And but I think as board members who serve on committees, all of us should be kind of thinking about what we learned and how we could apply that and when we would apply it. And when we were in the meeting, a couple items came up, like the facilities work that we're doing, obviously, is a really big one that we'll probably need to do maybe a level 3 on, I'm thinking. And it may be that the recommendation is to hire someone to help us through that, as opposed to us trying to do it all ourselves, because we just don't have that kind of experience and the district is busy. You know, maybe we have enough resources in the district, but that would be a call that Dr. Baker would make on, you know, how do we do that level of engagement. So any questions that come to mind, or like, you know, thoughts that people have had after the meeting and have reflected on that they wanted to kind of share and kick around, you know, with everyone? Happy to entertain that. Okay, Jess and then Steve.
I have less of a question, more of a comment that it was really great to go to the last meeting in Ripton and see like Dave in action and just like really see how he does a lot of the things that he talked about. So if folks have an opportunity, it works for your schedule to go to the next one. It was great to just really move from conceptualizing to like seeing how it plays in real time with
Nice.
people in the room experiencing it. So
Excellent, yeah.
That would also be true of Bridport Shoreham, you know, I mean, any of those meetings, I mean, I think it's, I mean, obviously, you know, if you're planning to go, we'll make sure that, right, we don't have all 13 people, you know, at one of those meetings. And when you are a board member that's attending those things, allowing the group there that's doing the process to do the process is important, you know, in that respect. But I think it's a wonderful check and balance when operations is running something in accordance with kind of what we're trying to do together, and board members are able at least to get a window into, you know, what does that look like? And we've done a lot of good work around that together over the last, you know, year and a half, and it's very valuable to us, you know. And sometimes, I mean, I can think of a time when Suzanne was at a meeting in Bridport and she knew the context of a question, and she really understood how we could approach it in service to the family that had the question that they were raising. And those kinds of things are just, they're so helpful, you know, so I'm glad you brought that up, Jess.
Okay, Steve, did you?
Yeah.
When I was there and he was talking about the committee that was happening around Ripton and the future of Ripton and all that kind of stuff, it was my understanding that survey was then going to be closed very soon and that we would hear some results back from that. And I haven't seen any update on that. I thought that was, I mean, I was expecting it to be last meeting, and then when I didn't see it on the agenda this time, I was like, okay, did the plan change, or are we waiting on something, or?
I think you
would
got
like an
something in the last spotlight, actually, you know, like that, not the one today, but the last spotlight that is a kind of a synopsis. And
Oh, okay.
so, yep, so when you look at that, you know, just as an update, that if that is not where you want it to be, let me know, you know, and we'll send you some things, you know, so.
There's an attachment.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And at some point, there will be a report back to the board.
Yep.
Right, and I believe that's October?
Yep,
Yep.
so the end of, the report from that work should be coming to the board at the end of October, but the committee will meet again shortly, and then, you know, there'll be more of a, okay, here's how that went, and this is what this looked like, and so on and so forth, so as a way of making sure that everybody kind of just generally stays apprised of where things are. A lot of the things that go on in those meetings are, they're interactive, which is just, it's really interesting, you know, to watch data be sorted differently, and, you know, and the things that, the tools, the enabling technologies that Dave is using, are, you know, are they're really compelling, and it's taught those of us on the operations side just some interesting tricks, you know, to be able to think about, you know, in displaying results from surveys in a much more sophisticated way than we normally do, so, yep.
And so, you know, the intent of this is just to really, you know, continue to keep us moving forward, because this is a major goal that we've set for ourselves, right? And so obviously, as school board work goes, it's a slow process. And I've come to, you know, try to appreciate that. I'm a kind of individual that's always wanting to like, okay, why aren't we there already? But it's really important to do it in a public way and having full input from everyone as we're going along. I guess the last question I would ask is, if you think of something, that would enable, or that we might need as a board, to continue down this journey, and whether it's more training, whatever, please share that, to make sure that we're well-grounded and we're moving forward in the right direction, right? If there's more resources that are needed, or as a next step, that would enable us to do this work well.
I do have an offer, and that is to take the sheet that Dave led us through, kind of from left to right in terms of the different types, and laminate that, so that board members have that.
Yeah.
That could just kind of be part of committee meetings, like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
we're gonna engage the committee, the community, all right, what are we doing? Are we informing?
Yes,
Are we
yes.
asking for input? Are we collaborating? Just,
Great idea.
sometimes that's just a quick thing
Yep.
that helps, so.
Yep. And we didn't plan this, so.
No, we did not, but I have to say, selfishly, Emily Blistein, who is on, she's doing a great job capturing what is going really well in one place, and trying to help us to bring that to other new ways that we're engaging in, and so she'll be continuing to help the principals to do those things too. So it's really helpful to have this focus, both on the operational side and the governance side.
Okay. That's all I had, and thank you for the discussion. And doing this once in a while on a particular topic, I think, is a good thing, appropriately, obviously. So we're, honoring folks' time and commitment as well. So next up, we have the policy committee, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Jamie.
Okay, thanks so much. So again, this looks like a lot, but it's not that much actually. That's the twist. So there's two sections here. There's as you see, the first read policies, which we can talk about. I think I should make a motion, and then the second read policies. So should I start by kind of like we did last time, making a motion to adopt these policies, and then we discuss it?
So we're not adopting anything tonight.
Right. What is the motion I made last time?
You made,
To move them for first read.
First read, with the understanding that they would come back second read as if they were going in the manual.
Okay.
Right.
I don't think you need to make a motion yet. I think we're still just discussing.
Okay, I did last time for some reason, but
Well,
I
I guess
don't
the
know why.
discussion on the table.
That's right.
Okay, so can we just discuss it, or? Okay, well, I'll just explain what I think.
Yes.
So these policies listed as first read are basically, we kept them out of the original ones below them because I think I mostly thought that they seemed to be weightier and more potentially contentious or whatever else, and wanted to give them more time. So we did that, and as it turns out, the updates that we thought were appropriate to make, and that VSBA recommends, that brings them up to certain kinds of legal standards and whatever else, were more or less very simple to make and did not require any alterations to our current practice at all. The exception would be F5, which is the behavioral threat, which is the only policy on this list that we don't currently have. But VSBA is saying we need to have it by October. That's why it's on this list. Just a very brief summary at our meeting to discuss these policies. I would say the ones that garnered the most discussion were C5, F5, and maybe C11. But honestly, those I would say those are the main ones. So that's just an outline as to what we did. I'm sure you've all read the edits and updates below, and I don't want to take too much time. We can just answer any questions people have.
Right.
So it's really, these are being presented for first read.
Correct.
We can have some discussion about them today. However, we will also be discussing them at our next meeting.
Well,
But if you have questions, you should be bringing them up now. if in fact you've read them and you have questions or you think something needs to be different, it's important so that they can then take it back. Because legally, you have to have a first read for the public as well as the board. And then you also then, before we can vote on them, it has to be 10-day warning, which is why we're not voting on the second read ones, because it wasn't a 10-day warning.
Okay. So I thought when I had read the statute at the end of last meeting, the statute said you needed to give a 10-day warning to the general content of the policy. It wasn't that you had to have the exact wording of the policy, but that you needed to say in 10 days we're going to be voting on, or
The
passing
final draft.
this final draft. So, which is why I was confused that the second read for action was set for action for next meeting when I thought we would be having action today.
So I followed up on the questions from last meeting. And VSBA said we are one of the few boards in the state that by our policy do a first and a second read. They do have to be warned 10 days in advance, and they have to be warned so the public can see exactly what's in them when they're going to be presented. I asked the question about the first read and how it was the red line version, and the direction that came back was that by best practices, when you do a first read and then a final read, they should look as if they were going into your manual. So like if you have a red line version that you want to see where you want to show where changes happen, you can attach that, but then attach the next version that shows, oh, this is going into the ACSD policy and all the changes that have been made. So then what you're saying when you pass it from first read to second read, you're either good with that first read or the board, which has happened in the past, we've discussed a policy at first read and said, we don't really like this piece and we want the policy committee to take it back and look at it and make some changes to it. And then it goes back and becomes another first read again.
It's best practice, but it's not required in statute. And a first read isn't required in statute?
No.
So
Just 10 days.
It used to be.
I guess, so what you're saying is, if we present at the first read, here's the red line copy and here's what it would look like in the policy manual.
Which is what happened in this.
No,
Then
it's
it-
not.
no,
The
it-
ACSD isn't
right.
in there. It's not our policy.
It's just the red line version.
Then it could be,
There should be,
whatever meeting is more than 10 days later, could then be the voting
Right.
meeting.
Unless you've made changes to it during your first read.
And I'm assuming by changes you mean substantive changes, not periods, capitalization, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And the only, well,
Steve, go ahead, and then Jamie.
the only caveat I would say, and Tricia, I don't think that saying that we're gonna read it next time in a board meeting counts as warning. It has to be publicly warned, like
An action item.
right, like an action item on the next agenda. So we can say, okay, that counts as first read, but that doesn't, I don't think that meets that it has been displayed to the public and saying we're passing this in 10 days. Do you see what I mean? So if we said that at that meeting, right, and that meeting was 11 days ago, but then the warning and the agenda that warns the public that this is the second read for that policy
Right.
came out on Friday of that week, then that's not 10 days warning. Do you see what I mean? So I think that. I don't think the agenda for this meeting came out the day after the last meeting. So that's why we can't do second read, or that's why I can't do second read on these policies.
So we can't vote on it. is what I'm saying.
Right, exactly, exactly.
And that's why, Tricia, on the agenda,
It says for
that
action.
the action will
Yes.
take place on September 22nd.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, and
And for the first read, we did do a clean copy and a marked up, but it doesn't have all the header stuff in it yet, I guess.
Yeah,
I think that's.
I misunderstood your email, I guess, that I made the headers for the other policies,
Yeah,
like with the Arial font.
and I didn't catch it, so I
Yeah,
apologize.
so,
That's why it's not.
Yeah.
yeah.
So while you're talking about that, I could call attention to something that I think is just important to say out loud relative to C7.
Right.
The content of C7 is not materially different in this update, but in practice, this is a policy that we are adhering to in different ways. We are only counting truancy as unexcused absences, and we are only counting excused absences as those absences that are listed here, which were also listed in the previous version, that come from the AOE, that are specific. And when I'm asked to excuse a student, as the superintendent, I'm excusing the student if there are other educational opportunities that the student is taking advantage of. I'm not excusing a student if we're going on a cruise and the parent is feeling like, okay, yeah, there's no educational value here. We're just going on the cruise and we would really like to just go on the cruise. Go on the cruise by all means and safe travels, and that's wonderful, but they're just recorded as unexcused absences, in that sense. And this is something that we are really working together as a district to come together around. I think there was some, when the pandemic was in place, there was a little bit of a practice change that if a parent called the student out for any reason, then it was excused because the parent called them out, and which is not really where our policy is. And so we are coming together. That you will see that in the principal's newsletters if you have a chance to read those, and around that, and that those unexcused absence pieces are listed there. We in many of our schools, we have as many as 20% of our students who are chronically absent. So that's obviously we want to work together to say how can we not have that, and why is that happening? What does that look like? Which is work that Sonia, Dr. Afeline is leading for us in terms of connecting with our agency resources, and then also, with our families as we keep going, as the months continue on and she's able to get to that place. So that the wording here is not different, but we are working in practice to adhere more to the policy that is here, which is a change.
Okay. I'm going to do Jason and then come back to you, Jamie, if that's okay. And then Ellie. Sorry.
Do we currently have a truant officer?
Yes. Yes, we have a couple, actually. Yes. Yeah, we have the board has designated our county sheriff, as our truancy officer to ensure that all the schools can be served, but Middlebury PD also helps us regarding students in Middlebury.
I'm going to let Ellie ask her question, then I'll go to you, Jamie.
Well, it's more of just a comment, but I was thinking that once there's some clarity on this and kind of practice change, I wonder if there's a way that we could bring this to the student body to explain the differences, because I know, speaking as a parent last year, my students thought it was incredibly unfair that I wouldn't call them out every time they just got up late, and I was like, that's not an excuse.
Right.
No, yes, it is. All the other parents do it. They just call and then it's an excuse. Well,
there may have been some truth to that on some level. Again, coming from just a different place, and parents know their kids, right? And that's important. I think that our nursing team is actually pulling together some very clear guidance about what does it mean to be sick, because when we were in the pandemic, right, if you had a sniffle, then that was thought of one way, whereas and now we might be in a little bit of a different place. So I think there are a number of people coming together with exactly those same things, so that parents have different resources about how to support kids the best way. Yeah.
Jamie.
So this is one of those times, this kind of policy is, when we went over these, so I came across this and we were talking about it, and I was like, oh, this seems like a like a class size policy thing where we had the policy, but we weren't actually implementing it exactly. And then there were pretty far-reaching ramifications implementing that policy, right? And so a couple times when we were going through these, it hit me like, oh, and for this one exactly, this seems one of those policies where I, as a parent of somebody who goes to school, didn't fully know this, and now that I do know it, it's like, well, did we violate it or whatever, and what are the ramifications of that,
Right.
And so it just goes. I'm just pointing this out to show that these updates that we're doing are sometimes clarifying, if only because it points out that we have stuff, or keeps us accountable to in some ways, our own policies.
Yes.
Even if they don't change much.
Yeah.
So, can I just say a little bit about F5? So, and it may be better, Wendy, if you explain most of it, but I'll just say that this policy is basically, if you didn't read it, what happens in a school when we think there is a threat of all kinds of threat. I don't know, how to put it. And it is my understanding that it's basically it follows what we already do, but we did have a discussion about it at our committee, which was involved and interesting. And I just wonder if anybody wants to just bring any of that up, just to make sure the full board, or Steve Cash was saying, elevates the thing, what that discussion is and what are the stakes of that policy. I'm a bad person to do it, but if somebody else, if you guys was opening that, and you guys want to do that, then feel free.
Go ahead, Jess.
I'm not totally prepared because, and this goes back to our reading question, but I thought we would have one more week to discuss the ones that were presented here before we pass them, but I was hoping to bring notes on this one.
And it will be on the agenda again, basically as a warning with 10 days.
Okay, cool.
Right, so we can have more discussion.
So, more to come, but when F5 was being debated in the legislature, there was lots of conversation across the state on what it means for students' privacy rights and what it means, because the policy requires that a law enforcement agent is a part of the behavioral threat assessment team. And there's not a lot of, in my opinion, there's not a lot of guardrails around when students are aware that that some of their behavior is a threat that's being assessed, and when parents are made aware of when their child is a part of this process. So from my perspective, there's a lot of gray area. So I've been thinking, and something I hope to bring to the group next time, is how we can dispel any of that gray area in the policy to make the procedure side feel like it really holds our students' well-being at the center. That's just something on my mind. But the Vermont Legal Coalition, or maybe it's Vermont Legal Aid, someone put out guidance, actually, a toolkit for parents to say, hey, behavioral threat assessments are a required thing in Vermont now, and here's everything you need to know about that, and here's your rights as it relates to a parent of a minor who could be being assessed in this way. So, just something that is on my mind personally, but was part of the conversation at policy committee.
Okay, Jason.
I'm curious what our current state is in this area. Do we have a behavioral threat assessment team or something that functions like it?
Yes.
How will that change or not with this policy?
Yeah, so we do have teams at individual building levels, and we also have our safety team functions in that way, and members of that function in that respect, and our school resource officer is part of that team. His training as a law enforcement officer is different, and his he's under contract with us differently. So if we're if we're involving our school resource officer in assisting us, in a potential school safety circumstance, then that's different than if we're calling dispatch and we're asking for an officer, whether it's Vermont State Police or somebody from Middlebury PD to assist us. That's a very different scenario. So we do have those. And last year the state began to give trainings, and they're actually more, some of our team went to it last week, around this and around ways to achieve both ends of the policy goals as I remember them when they were present. One being to ensure that students who might say a thing out loud but actually pose no threat are not handled in the old zero tolerance context where that actually was quite problematic in terms of being able to support students to be growing and developing responsible members of a community and what that looked like, and also from the standpoint of positively resolving situations of school safety, such as the Fairhaven circumstance, where oftentimes information about safety concerns comes informally to school staff, and so what is the way to begin to utilize our community resources to resolve that before any incident has had the chance to come forward, and that really is the intent of the policy, to ensure that we don't have an escalated school safety circumstance that we could possibly avoid by ensuring that oftentimes it's that the family is apprised of a potential situation, that's occurring, and what is the right way to go about that, and do that. If you think of some of the national incidents that have caught a lot of attention, often the family was completely in the dark, right, of what might have been beginning to take place. So I think, it's from both of those ends that this initiative in Vermont really was born. And this model policy allows us to then begin to put procedures in place, which this policy says need to be aligned with the procedures in the agency of ed. You could revise it to take that out and say our procedures don't need to align with the agency of ed. I'm not sure how far we would actually get regarding that. But I think we have done a nice job working with our CSAC partners, and other partners throughout the area to make sure that if there are any concerns about students or adults who may be making comments or just appearing in ways that are causing concerns, we have ways to go about addressing that protect both the student or the adult and the school community from harm. Steve?
One thing I noticed reading this is, I assume, kind of the main focus of this is in an internal sense, but a lot of this reads also in an external sense. And obviously, I think any threat that can be anticipated and mitigated is good. It's just as far as a school district's ability, and so just reading that first paragraph, I just wonder how this policy fits if it's an external situation and it's not kind of from a student or something like that. And so that first paragraph, if you have the school district and then you have outside community members, there's just kind of seems to be a misalignment almost, that I'm just trying to kind of level with, because it's that first paragraph, and then the fifth paragraph also, it just seems like those could apply to external situations as well that I assume would be more appropriately handled just by law enforcement entities.
Actually, not necessarily. I think, whether it's an internal or an external circumstance, we would be using the same process, which we actually learned through our FEMA training that many of you might remember that we had last August, not this past August, but the August before, where we had federal trainers come in and help us understand how best to implement crisis response scenarios when it comes to assessing whether something poses a threat versus whether a threat is made to a community, which unfortunately in this day and age, we have all kinds of special names for threats, swatting, and right, there are things that come in from international foreign sources, and I know you've all read those news articles as well. So there's a lot more discernment that goes in for both external and internal sources. So the process is the same in that, we begin to answer the question of, does what we are experiencing pose a threat? So we pull together multi-agencies to determine whether that's the case. Sometimes we might pull in a mental health agency, depending on the circumstance. Other times we're pulling in, sometimes state and federal law enforcement when that's the scenario. But it's the same process of really kind of mindfully going through those pieces. And what has increased exponentially in my time of service between superintendencies is the federal agency's ability to support local entities in determining if something poses a threat. It's really remarkable. And so, those networks have been a wonderful support to school districts, certainly across our state, and I imagine across the country in that sense. So it's the same idea. Really, the paragraph 5 speaks specifically to Jess's point, actually, about, none of this is about referring a student to the criminal justice system. That is not at all what we're talking about in this scenario. There's no assumption that a student has broken a law, even if they have, said something that's unfortunate, or even if there is something that poses a threat. That is not the school district's responsibility. We want to make sure that we're maintaining safety for our learning community at all costs.
All right. Yeah, and I do, obviously, any of these situations that get addressed, however, I think is a good thing. I don't want that to be misunderstood. Under that administrative responsibilities, number 3, it's just very broad. Establish a mechanism which allows for students, staff, and others to report threatening and troubling behavior. And I guess just so long as you feel like you're on solid ground of what type of situation the district is prepared to navigate versus it's like, no, that needs to get referred to a police department or something like that. So as long as you feel you have that guidance, then I think I'm all right. But it's very broad. Our relationships with our law enforcement agencies are very good, and it's we work together to ensure that we're over informed, probably, and not even around specific individuals, but just here's something we're hearing. Are you hearing that? If so, are you connecting with other law enforcement agencies in the state? Because often some of these things are multi-district, we've been able to pull that together well, I think, and that feels good.
Okay, Ron and then Steve.
You mentioned, Dr. Baker, that the federal government has been improved their means of communicating when they perceive student threat. Do you know, is that on the basis of further surveillance students? How do you think that's come about?
I think I'm not sure how it's come about, honestly, and it's I just want to clarify, not necessarily student threat, right? Any threats. So there are, the FBI has mechanisms of being able to search down the origins, probably through use of technology, IP addresses, right? All kinds of things to determine exactly where something is originating in a manner that is far more advanced than you know, what certainly has been in place. Now, what gives them that opportunity, I'm not certain. And, you know, I'm not certain I'd be happy about it if I knew about it, but I am very happy to know where we stand relative to any concerns about student safety. So, you know, it's a good question.
Thank you.
Steve.
Yeah, I would point back to the rash of bombing threats that came out very recently, and it turned out that it was a I won't call it a prank, but it was something that became very popular on the internet,
Yeah.
and it was happening around the country.
Yeah.
And the law enforcement informed the schools and saying, look, you have to make the decision whether to do, you know, whether to evacuate the school, cancel school, whatever it is. But this is what's happening nationally. It's probably a hoax. And that, I think that might be a little bit more along the lines of what you're thinking, Ron, as to why they're better informed, because they are communicating better interagency across the country electronically. So, but the two things that I did want to point out is that I know, because we are looking at this at Hannaford, the law says we have to have this in place by October 1st. And we are really pushing up, and I know Jamie mentioned this, but I would say that if we are discussing about changing it, this is one that really should go back to the lawyers, and that's not a quick process. So if we, and VSBA has lawyered this one through. So, you know, I'm playing with that tension in my mind. We want a good policy, but if that puts us over the line that says we're not in compliance with the law anymore, what about that? And so I think we really need to, if we're gonna agonize over this particular policy, maybe we need to pass that policy, and if we want to talk about it more, we could revise it in a later session when we have time. But I think that deadline looming over our head is October 1st. And no matter what kind of in-depth discussion, which I don't have a problem with, we can change policies. It's not like you can't, you know, it's not like, oh, well, we passed this policy, we can't change it 2 weeks later.
Right.
Yeah, we can. You know, if we feel like it's not serving us. But I think that having that Damocles sword over our head of October 1st, we got one more meeting, unless we want to come back here and do this again in a special meeting, and I don't think anybody wants to do that. So, I mean, I know this is supposed to be first read, but I think if we do this right, we can get this in by September 22nd and be in compliance with the law. So that was the only observation I had on that first read set of policies. Maybe this one's a little special, and I don't know if we can warn that.
You may have to warn it individually.
Separately, yeah, like tomorrow or something like that, so we can get it in by September 22nd. But you know, I think that's we don't want to run afoul of being out of compliance with the legislature, and heaven forbid something should happen, and then we don't have the policy in place and we're out of compliance. So I think let's get compliant, and then maybe we can do a better debate later if we still want to. So.
I'm in agreement, but I also want you to know that it's an effective practice in school safety. It's been proven as such even in the state of Vermont. So this is we are doing this now because it is an effective practice. The great thing about having a policy requirement is it is elevated then for public discussion, you know, in that sense.
Jamie.
I have two questions here. Just on this thing, talking about school safety, I'll just draw people to C5, the firearms policy, which really is about students bringing firearms to school. In the course of doing this, me and Wendy did discuss, and actually with Darcy, and found that the federal law does also prohibit firearms, anyone bringing a firearm onto school grounds, which, to be honest, I did not know before. And so this policy doesn't speak to that, but that is a law and what did you say? Oh, sorry. And as a practice. So my other question is procedural, and this is to Steve's point. Can all of these first read policies become second read policies on 9/22?
For us to take action on?
Well, yeah.
If I warned them tomorrow.
If we warn them.
Yeah, if we warn them.
Before the 12th.
Yeah,
Because
before
it's
the
the 12th. It wouldn't have to be tomorrow.
Okay, the 12th, so it's not
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Okay.
I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, okay.
Steve's office right, so.
We meet tomorrow.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
10 days.
we can get you the good-looking final draft, ACSD, blah, 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 policies. And that way we could all second read all of them on the 22nd.
Okay, so, yeah, so we'll do a special warning then, that just has those policies on it. I haven't done it before, but it can't be impossible.
No, that's
Yeah.
Okay.
commonly done.
Yeah,
Okay, thank
so
you.
that we meet the 10-day.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, Jason?
If we have questions about others that are in the first read
Oh, yeah.
chunk,
Please
should we
do.
put those out now?
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question about C11, the student freedom of expression in school sponsored media.
Yep.
Do we currently have a media advisor?
Where are you?
Yes, Emily.
C11.
Yeah, but
26.
Yep,
Oh,
C11, you mean definition number 1, media
Right.
advisor? Yeah, that would be Emily.
Okay.
And Emily Blistein, our Director of Communications and
And
Engagement.
she does trainings currently?
She does, I would say more one-to-one consulting, pieces, depending upon there are, some of the schools have different folks who run, the social media, and she works with them directly, to ensure that's all done well. She also works with Will Hatch, who's the Director of Technology, around, how do we best utilize media, but also maintain cybersecurity protocols that feel responsible in a school district setting.
Okay. Anything else? Yes,
I got another one.
good.
C29, the district equity policy, it calls for establishing a continuous improvement plan and related to equity. I think there's something about being on an annual basis reviewed. Do we do that currently? Or?
Yes, we do. As a matter of fact, that is on Dr. Afline's list of things to do, and she was just speaking to another committee today about sort of pulling that together and establishing this is where we are, this is where we need to go, and this is the process for getting there. The strategic plan has some of that, on a larger scale, but it is her job to take that and bring that down a grain size level or 4 and begin to march us forward in special and identifiable progress.
And did you hint earlier at us seeing some of that work as a full board?
I did.
Okay.
I don't know if it was this meeting or another, but I think the board work plan that the executive committee is going to look at has some of that coming to you in the winter.
Okay, good questions, Jamie, or Jason? Sorry.
Jamie had nice questions.
Jamie did too.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
sorry, too many J's. Yes, Ron.
So this is kind of just the line editor and me, but the green text, I'm on page 29. The green text is stuff that we're adding, or like there's green and there's red, but it's all
policy are you
crossed off.
on?
I'm at
Is it C28?
I'm at C28.
Yeah, I remember that.
There's also page 29.
why
of
is
the
that?
PDF.
There's green and red interspersed. 2 different people editing it.
Yeah,
I think
probably
Okay.
2 different
Thank
people
you.
edited.
Thank
Yep.
you. Yeah, Microsoft Word, not my friend.
I think it's actually me from 2 different computers. Because I switched in the last 3 weeks, so I think that's what it is. I don't think, yeah. So, yeah.
Oh dear. Jason.
My last question is D24, the special education policy. The policy doesn't really do anything other than say that we're going to follow special education law.
Correct.
Do we need that?
We don't technically, it's recommended.
Okay.
So we do have other policies that basically sort of say we're going to follow the law. And I don't know, this was on the books for a while, but what is...
I don't have a problem with that. There's
Yeah.
tons of laws that we have to follow.
Yeah.
We do not
Right.
follow
Right.
before,
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's fine.
Yeah.
I guess.
I'm glad we have it, but we would be following the laws anyway.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
That was it.
Okay. Any others?
Just a real quick question, for F-26, the security cameras, who, just like operationally, like who has access to the footage? Because we keep it for 30 days.
Yeah.
And at the bottom, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act is linked, or I guess cited. Yeah, so I'm just curious about that.
So the reason that is cited is because any of that is considered an educational record, which means it's covered under FERPA. So really administrators only have access to that. If there is if there's something else that comes up as a need, for example, if an administrator isn't able to identify a student that's on a record and needs to pull in somebody else that they think can, then actually, one of the things in this policy is that that's recorded so that that's clear. We do not send footage out to parents of multiple students. We get that request a lot. Could I just see what my child did and all the other kids, that were involved in the situation? And the answer is no, because it's an educational record for multiple kids. And so when that's the case, we can't send that out without violating the FERPA rights of other students, in that circumstance. Does that answer your question, Jess? It's a very limited access. I suppose Bruce could probably find his way in there if he had to, just because Bruce can find his way into almost anything that is in the facilities realm, which the cameras are, but that's not, he doesn't access that. It's really building administrators that are doing that. And or their designee if it's a circumstance like Ben Weir at the high school or so on and so forth.
And if it's, sorry, can I ask another one? Just going back to F5. Right, because they're all attached. So in that, the behavioral threat assessment team, which can be all these different people, you might use the security footage in that instance. And then it's more people than, right?
No, we would never make security footage like that available. We would take the security footage, ask ourselves, okay, these are the questions that we have that we need assistance in resolving, that have come up from the footage. But anyone else that sees the footage is going to see the same thing that we did. So, it's not that we would need help with that.
Cool.
No, we were very clear about protecting students' rights. Right. That's a seminal part of what we do.
And that's a best practice that we do, but it's not written into the policy, right?
It is written into FERPA rights in the sense that we cannot share information about students with people who do not need to know that information. So. I suppose there could be a circumstance, let's say, where, a student puts something in a locker and that thing was deemed to be potentially threatening. We might have a law enforcement that is looking at where the locker is so that they can best access a potential device in that circumstance. But that type of thing would be very few and far between, and obviously carefully monitored. And they have confidentiality circumstances as well. So, law enforcement's standard for being able to access information in order to run any kind of criminal prosecution is much higher than a school district standard for being able to determine whether there's been a student conduct violation or a school safety concern. So we do not share any footage or records with any law enforcement agency that is not subpoenaed.
Including the school resource officer and
the school resource officer might be a little bit different, but not much. And they're also not part of a criminal. That's not a criminal investigation in that sense. And they're very clear about those lines. That's national training that that our SRO has had, and is we meet about that pretty regularly.
Cool, thank you.
Yep. Steve?
And nothing in in F5.5, that's the FERPA paragraph. So it's not just video recordings, it's all information.
Yes.
And that's that need to know, only need to know is in there. So it is in F5.
Yes.
A specific reference to FERPA, so.
We do not aid law enforcement with any investigation at all outside of a subpoena.
Okay. Are we good at this point? Okay, thank you, Jamie, and thank you,
need to
board.
move these
You
for
need to
first
move 'em.
read?
Yeah, so we will then move, can I have a motion to move the listed first read policies to, what's the wording?
Move for first reading.
And move for first reading.
So moved.
Okay, a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of moving the listed policies under item 1 as first read policies, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Okay, wow. Thank
Yeah,
you,
the
Kat.
policy quiz.
Everything on that policy list on the agenda tonight is coming back for
Yes, and we're gonna warn.
second read and approval on the 22nd.
Yes, and so what we're gonna do is do a special warning, so that we can include the first read policies in, with enough lead time to meet the 22nd date. Excellent. Okay, looking at the agenda, I think we are at second public comment period. I can't quite see there's no one there, I don't believe.
But our public left.
And our public is left in the room. Next up is board reflections. Is there any board reflections that anyone would like to share at this point, at this time? Jason?
I would like to thank the policy committee. That is a truckload of work.
Yes. Thank you.
And I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Others, anything else? Okay. Are we ready to entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, a second? Okay, it is currently 8:38.
So.